You are about to journey against the current of contemporary thought and beyond the troubled waters of daily news to the very source of our extraordinary culture. You are going upstream with Cashill and Edge.
Okay, welcome, world. You are here today with Loy.
Hello,
Edge,
Jack.
Jack Cashill. Upstream with Cashill and Edge, where we're going today to the source of all the world's problems and solutions.
That's right. We're getting at it before they turn it political on us.
Before they turn it political, right. So what happens is, we've talked about this before, but just for those people who are just tuning in, this is our show's theme is based on the Breitbart quote, is that all politics is downstream from culture. So we go upstream to find the source, and to find the source of not only of our bounties, but also of our problems. So,
and hopefully we'll find them in the future where we can nip them at the butt.
And the butt. Dam that stream before it flows down, So now, welcome back. We've had a good run of episodes here. You were telling me about your experience in living in Los Angeles back in your Hollywood days.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about how Hollywood agents are calling us all the time to try to get upstream to go national.
I'm willing if the money's right,
But when I went back there, Jack, I don't know if I want to go back there because the nice peaceful walk I had every day from my little mid-Wilshire apartment to Beverly Hills to the glorious offices of William Morris Agency, where I would go for auditions each day. It was a great little walk.
Yeah.
A lot of nice shops on Wilshire, kind of flat. The weather was always perfect. I loved it. It was the only way to get myself out and get some exercise. Well, last time I went back there, it's one big homeless encampment. There are tents and I guess you'd call them voluntary latrines all over the place the whole way. I don't want to go back.
I think I think we could successfully call that the downstream part of our culture.
That's the downstream part.
I just quickly as an anecdote, the first time I was in Los Angeles was in 1986, February. I entered a contest at a local pizza place, Minsky's, which you know of.
Oh, I know very well. Great pizza.
Yeah. And
Minsky's, delicious pizza.
And it was 25 words or less, why you want to go to Los Angeles. And I was working in advertising at the time. And I just sitting there waiting for my pizza. I wrote something down. And it was so uninspired, I almost didn't put it in a box. By my standards, it was uninspired, right?
That's right.
So I put it down.
Well, I didn't expect to get Cashill on the
right.
Minsky's.
That's, they would have paid for that.
Right.
Anyhow, I'm in my office a couple of weeks later, and I get this call. Jack Cashill? Yeah. You're the winner of a round trip for two to Los Angeles, blah, 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 blah. And I said to them on the air, I didn't know it was a radio show on the air, and I said, can I go to San Francisco instead? They said, hold it, cut. Let's do that one over, Jack. You're going to be excited when we could tell you this. All right, okay. It was being recorded. But I loved it. I get there in February. It just rained the last couple of days, and everything was so fresh and green and cool, and the weather was perfect. And I had a friend with a big old Mercedes who picked us up at the airport, and they put us up at Century City, and I'd go jogging every morning up Beverly Hills, into the Beverly Hills. And I said, boy, this is an underestimated place. But then I caught it on a very good day, and it probably isn't that way anymore.
It had a lot of great qualities. I mean, I really loved that area.
Yeah.
And I was able to stay off of the slab. As long as you're not on the highways,
right,
life is good.
And it's the word surface streets. You don't hear that in other cities, but surface streets in
Isn't
Los
that
Angeles.
A great name?
Yeah, it is.
Who made that up?
And there's one other vanity they have, and that is the use of the word "the," right, before the name of a highway.
Oh,
Only
yes.
in Los Angeles
405.
is the interstate like 405, the 405.
Well, I never thought of that. The 101,
right?
Yeah.
The 10, right? And at some point, let's say the 10, because the 10 goes east all the way to wherever it ends up, into Georgia or someplace. At what point does the 10 simply become I-10 or 10? Probably around, I don't know, Bakersfield or someplace, when the L.A. luster is lost and then you're back into reality.
Well, definitely in Bakersfield, the luster would be gone.
Yes.
It would definitely be gone.
Speaking of loss of luster, we are going to be talking this episode about two people who consciously tried to strip the luster from the American experience and have seemed to have succeeded, at least to a certain degree.
You're speaking of Professors Cloward and Piven.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking in one of the past episodes about Hegelian dialectic.
Right.
About, what is I call it problemate and solutionize.
Right. Yeah,
which
right.
these two did a great job of problemating and solutionizing. So you've heard of probably everybody's heard of the Cloward and Piven strategy.
Right. Not knowing that these were actually real people and they were married to one another.
Yeah. Columbia College, sociology.
Right.
The whole schmear.
Ms. Piven, by the way, Frances Fox Piven, is still alive and still teaching, right? Still poisoning minds. I think she's now at City University of New York. She's 90 years old.
As unrepentant as William Ayres.
There you go. Bill Ayres, terrorist, unrepentant terrorist. Right?
Unrepentant.
Who put the word unrepentant back into the vocabulary.
Yeah. It takes you really got to be somebody to actually have that word.
Right.
It's like my favorite one was fugitive financier.
Mark Rich.
Or no, it was Vesco.
Robert Vesco.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess maybe Rich took over.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I was kind of jealous of that one.
For a local, we are broadcasting out of Kansas City. I know it's a national show, but Mark Rich, by the way, went to Southwest High School in Kansas City.
Is that right?
Yeah, he did. So there you go. You never know. From humble acorns to mighty oaks thus spring.
How about
corrupt
that?
at the roots, but they spring.
How about that? So yeah, back in '66,
right, 1966.
Atlantic magazine.
It was Nation.
Nation.
Right.
Nation. I'm sorry.
Yes, I remember it well.
Yeah, Nation. Same thing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, basically.
All part of the big conglomerate.
Atlantic became kind of like the Nation.
Atlantic's become more like the Nation than the Nation.
But they published this little article about overwhelming the welfare system in order to bring down, the United States of America, basically.
I mean, that was their long-term goal. The short-term goal was simply to federalize welfare.
Yeah.
And their strategy to do that was, you're right, was to overwhelm local offices with would-be applicants. These are, an interestingly diabolical pair, because when you see pictures of them, they look so bourgeois.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they eat Ben and Jerry's, and they probably drive Subarus.
Well, he's dead, so Subaru driving days are kind of behind him right now.
Gone. He died a while ago, but she's still kicking. But what they have achieved is a whole lot of really bad stuff.
Yes.
That we're living with today, and a lot of it, if you look back and read this. It's not that long of an article. I mean, Everybody should read this thing. You can find it online, Cloward and Piven.
Right.
I forget what they called it. What was the title? It was like Dealing with Poverty or some
benign title.
Benign title. And and like you said, they wanted to federalize the welfare system. And I believe that what we're seeing today in all the criminally controlled cities,
right,
this has all come about because of the Cloward-Piven strategy. So I believe that we are seeing a de facto secession of American cities from the nation state. And it's a de facto secession because they are engaged in nullification through their, what do they call it, their where you can't arrest people for being a sanctuary city status.
Right.
All these things, this is nullification.
Yeah, I mean, the notion of a city as a city-state is a relatively new phenomenon in America, because cities used to be, part of integrated into the whole fabric of a state. Mm-hmm. They didn't see themselves as separate entities. I mean, there's always been feuding between, New York City and upstate, or Chicago and downstate, but never did they become laws unto themselves. Now, before going further, I have to share you one quick anecdote about The Nation, the publication,
Okay.
which is really just a pretty left rag. I mean, it's not even glossy. You know, it doesn't have pictures or anything.
No, it's pulp. It's
It looks like
it's
a
got-
newsletter. I mean, it's,
yeah.
well, younger people may not remember these days, but I'm only talking about 30 years ago, when you could actually have friends who were on the other side of the political aisle. You know,
yeah, of
where they'd be
course.
civil to you. And, you know, my wife is a university professor. So I've been to many events where I'm the guy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a debate party once, even. I mean, you know, where Reagan was Mondale. I mean, it was like watching, Purdue play Duke a couple of weeks ago. It's just another thing, but that's for a side for basketball fans. But it was 17-1. I counted. The 17 people on the opposition won. The host, a very nice fellow who's since deceased, an older guy. He was about a generation older than I was. An old school liberal. His wife was an old school liberal. Very sweet, very kind and accommodating, even to people like me. As a Christmas present, got me a subscription to The Nation. Because he thought if I read The Nation,
Right.
I'd just come around. I'd be reading Cloward and Piven. I'd say, where have I been? How could I have been so far wrong believing in individual liberty, living in free enterprise, believing in God? You know, how misbegotten were my worldviews until I discovered The Nation. There it was, you know, and it was such a good-hearted gesture on his part, right?
Boy, that really is true, isn't it?
And then I haven't got an invitation in 20 years, so it's been, literally.
But then again, that you're talking about political philosophy versus the real politic. I mean, liberals that has changed.
That has changed.
And have their hearts changed? What has changed in the liberal? If you look at the liberal,
right.
And the liberal was more of a libertarian person at that point.
At that time, at least they believed nominally in free speech and trial by jury. You know, some of the things that, you know, were the bedrocks of the American experience. Mm-hmm. But now, and this has a lot to do with where Cloward and Piven have taken us.
Yes.
When they look at, let's say, the scene in To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus Finch is sitting there with a shotgun in front of the jailhouse, and there's a mob out front, who do they identify with?
I wonder.
The mob. They probably won't say that, but that's who they are. That's who they become. And the Atticus Finch, the guy now is like the savior complex. They talk about guys like, they denounce the Atticus Finches of the world because they're white and they're interfering with a process that he shouldn't be, co-opting the role that, you know, Sidney Poitier should be playing or something.
And you can really feel that if you read this Cloward and Piven article.
Yeah.
Because you can feel the hubris.
Right.
They are sitting there, a couple of white professors.
Yes.
And they're talking about these Negroes.
Right. And using that word, Negro.
Yes.
At 66, that was the word.
Right.
Right.
And but the way that they were objectifying, and then they were saying they were targeting Democrats.
Right.
And they were saying, you Democrats need to get in there and push these the welfare recipients to demand more.
That's right. And in fact, they started or were founding members of the Welfare Rights League.
Yes.
What they were doing was collectivizing a group of people who otherwise would simply be, an individual. I mean, historically, we've worked as individuals. Or if you were a collective, it was because you all worked together, for instance, on a work site. But what you have in common from Cloward and Piven's point of view are sheer numbers, sheer aggregate. I mean, you become a mass, you become a collective. You become a mob to mobilize when the need was there for you to mobilize.
That's right.
And so their crowning glory really came in 1993 when they were the main architects of the Motor Voter Act.
That's right.
And you see them in a photo standing behind Bill Clinton while he signs the bill. And they look like, your godfather and his wife. They look like nice, civil, middle-class, people. That's probably part of the whole strategy, They don't look like like the Tom Haydens of the world back then, or the unrepentant terrorist Bill Ayers.
But they were rabble rousers.
Right.
Absolutely. And they turned this into a mob to demand more and more welfare rights.
Right.
I mean, they took, and it was well planned out politically. Well, the white liberals, we can persuade them because they'll want to do the right thing and they won't think it's that bad. I mean, it was a devious plot.
Oh, and a successful one. And, because it came on the heels of another report that was written a year earlier by Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And oddly, I've been steeped in this because I have a book coming out, and I believe my release date is July. I'm trying to get it moved up. And it's called Untenable. It's part memoir. The subtitle tells a story. It's the true story of white ethnic flight from America's cities. Mm-hmm. And I had a front row seat on that. I was there. I watched it all happen. Mm-hmm. But going back, I was reading the Moynihan report. They sometimes call it. It was like the case for. It was about the Negro family, and it was that those two words were in the title, and it was an alarm. He was ringing an alarm bell, and this is in 1965, and it is so prescient, so prophetic. And what he writes at that point, he was Assistant Secretary of Labor under Lyndon Johnson. He writes that. Right now, at that point, 25% of all the children, all young black children, were living in single-parent households. He goes, what this assures is that right now we have an equality. Now that we have equality of opportunity, because the Civil Rights Act had been passed in 64 and the Voting Rights Act in 65, he said down the road, 20 years, with these kind of numbers, there will not be equality of outcome. And people will be frustrated and they'll get angry, right? Mm-hmm. And he was more right than he knew. Mm-hmm. Now we're not talking 25%, we're talking 75%. We're talking 25% in the white community.
That's right.
At that point, it was 2%. So what happens, and this is where these forces come to head, the Cloward-Piven allies, there are a lot of them. They have all, by that time, infested the entire civil rights establishment.
That's right.
They own it. They're not interested in civil rights
That's
anymore.
right. They had gotten in front of it. They were leading from behind.
That's right.
The process had built up with a lot of mainly Republican impetus to create a civil rights in proactive civil rights environment. But then all of a sudden, this gang comes in and says, "Let's take it over there."
Right, because the momentum was already behind them quietly. Yeah. What Moynihan pointed out is that historically, in the black community or the white community, when unemployment rates went down, when the employment rates went up, welfare rolls went down. Mm-hmm. That was the natural progress. Employment goes up, welfare goes down. What had happened in several years prior to 1965 is black families made huge progress in the 50s.
They had almost achieved parity.
Right, almost achieved parity.
By the early 60s,
right.
They were so close to parity that it was getting very scary to the grievance mongers.
That's right. Absolutely right. Because with parity, they lose their footing in that community. In Newark, for instance, where I grew up, and it's really the test city for my book. I mean, I talk about other cities, but it's grounded in Newark. Other than Jews, blacks in late 1950s were virtually at parity with Italians and Irish. But Moynihan noticed this disturbing trend in the black community, and that is when employment was going up, welfare was going up simultaneously. It wasn't causing a drop in welfare. It's because and then he realized it's because of the growing numbers of single-family households, single-parent households. And so he sounds the alarm. And it should be read today because it was so prophetic. And when it was first distributed in the Johnson administration, everyone said, hey, this is great. This is cool. Boy, you're really onto something. We really need to get serious about strengthening the black family, strengthening all families. And then the civil rights establishment weighed in. And just as you suggest,
attacked the black family, attacked it with full force.
Because what this did is
with a bag of money.
Threatened their livelihood. What use do you have for a civil rights establishment if through individual achievement and hard work and following the American dream, your constituency is achieving exactly what they want to achieve? And by 65, and that's probably what triggered Cloward and Piven.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Because it comes a year later.
Mm-hmm.
That they could not.
It was purely political.
Yeah. They could not allow this to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems counterintuitive that if you're a civil rights leader, you would want the group you represent to succeed. But that underestimates the deviance of the corrupt element of the civil rights community by 1966, 65.
And my friends, it is, if you think it was bad in 66, all these things are rackets now. Every single one of these things is a racket. So when you see the people actually achieving positive goals, you can bet your bottom dollar they're trying to figure out some new way to problemate and solutionize.
That's right.
Because that's what they do.
And it's interesting because you bring up that racket because it was Eric Hoffer, I think, who was the blue collar philosopher who said, movements all start out as all good causes start out as a movement, then they become businesses, and eventually they degenerate into rackets.
Yeah.
However, I would say in the last few years, the whole anti-racist movement started as a racket, right? Started as a racket. They were, and it's I've had to, for this project I'm working on, I've had to read their books. I've had to read, Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibrahim Exendry and Robin DiAngelo.
Hazard pay for that.
And Tim Wise. And the stuff they say.
You're quoting Maya Angelou a lot, I've noticed.
When that happens, you can just pull the mic out of my hands. It's bad enough for the black racketeers involved, like Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ibrahim Exendry. They charge enormous amounts of money. People pay them.
Right.
But Robin DiAngelo, come on. DiAngelo's not even her birth name, She ethnicized her name. Literally. I mean, it's not like her husband's name either. I think she took it from her mother-in-law or something. I don't know where it came from. And to tell us about white fragility. And she's making, the last I checked, $700,000 a year. Pure racket, right? Mm-hmm. They're solving no problem. I was giving your mantra again about that.
Problemate and solutionize.
Right, they just problemate. There's no solutions to the problems they cause. And it's obviously infested just about every institution in America. But their spiritual fathers are, as you suggest, Mr. Richard Clowder and Ms.
Cloward and Piven.
Frances Fox Piven. Now, she's from Canada. That may explain a lot,
Yeah, I'm sure.
The Canadian thread is always...
Canada. God, we got to talk about how Canada folded so fast.
Honestly.
I've never seen anything like that. But, the Cloward-Piven strategy created a lot of nefarious, what would you say, collusion in cities that each one of these cities that adopted this.
Right.
And if you want to know which ones they are, do I live in a criminal city? Have they pronounced themselves to be these what I keep having trouble thinking of what they call it when you can't arrest somebody for being an illegal something sanctuary city.
Yeah.
If they claim that they're a sanctuary city, you're living in one of them, brother.
Yeah.
You're in a criminal city. And so if you look at the internal political machinations of all these cities, you can see that it's really there to perpetuate the Cloward and Piven strategy. It's there to keep adding fuel to the fire. It's there to take federal funds. You can see how well they have federalized everything because now the deal is federal money flows into these states and the money gets apportioned to these cities. And by the time the cities get that money, there are no strings attached to it.
No, you're absolutely
right.
It's
like, you got it, babe, drive it.
And looking at Newark in the 60s, for instance, that's exactly what happened. Now, I'll just give you an example of a local example of the way people think when they have to put their own money on the line. And it's different from when federal government drops a big, bucket of money on top of you. On my, I live in Midtown Kansas City, nice neighborhood. Homeowners association run by this manic lady who was always scheming, and she wanted some sort of like island at the foot of our street, which is a windy street, put in. It would have been inconvenient for everyone, except that her grandchildren lived on that street and she wanted the traffic to slow down. Okay, it cost $150,000. And I went to the meeting where we were discussing it. I said, okay, how many of you would put up your money if to put this in? Let's just say there's 50 people in this room or 50 people on the block affected. I lived on the same block that her grandchildren did. Would we each put up $3,000 to build this stupid, traffic divider, traffic slower, kind of thing? No, of course we wouldn't. But would we put in an application to the city to get the money? Yes, we would. That happened on a grand scale in urban America starting in the 60s. Because now the federal government was offering money for just about every project you wanted. Do you want to build a housing project? Well, we'll pay half, or we'll pay 90% in a lot of cases. Put up 90% of the money. Or put a highway through. We'll put up 90% for your highway. So whereas in the past, a city like Newark or a city like Baltimore, any city, they wouldn't build these public housing projects with their own money. But if it's someone else's money, they'll build them. And if it's someone else's money, well, they could always tear it down 20 years later and build another one because they do that. And then the real racketeers, and in a city like Newark, it was the Boiardo family, which was the model for The Sopranos, which is also Newark-based, the TV show. What they did is they started demolition companies, right? So to build a housing project, you had to declare an area a slum. Then you cleared the slum. Now, the people living in an area may thought it was the best place in the world, but it's now a slum, and now you have to hire the local demolition company. The demolition company, they make all their money, It was an incredible racket. And I know I studied Newark up close, but I'm sure it was exactly the same in 100 cities around the country.
Well, you look at the political allegiances that go on, and you know that, and everybody thinks, oh, wow, my city's weird and everything. But it's like you just said, it's going on in every city.
Right.
Every one of these criminally controlled cities are the same.
Yes.
And so there's big money in ghetto. These Cloward and Piven were using terms, they said, well, this is the ghetto, and they left no uncertain terms about what it is they were trying to do and who they were trying to motivate, and so their other objectives was to come out of this thing with a minimum income.
That's right, a guaranteed income.
Guaranteed income.
Which you were guaranteed regardless whether you worked or didn't, or even try to work or look for a job. Right.
Exactly, which is, I guess, is just flat out Marxist as you can get. I mean, is there anything more communist than guaranteed income with no association with productivity or work? And is anybody going to work?
Well, what's her name? Ms. Piven, she's 90 today, but she's an out of the closet socialist now. But now socialism school, I guess. And no, you're right. Their end game was essentially a Marxist state.
Yes.
Ruled over by the bourgeois, kleptocrats like, I don't know if now I'm going to call them kleptocrats. I don't know if they made any money out of it. But, apparatchiks like Cloward and Piven and their allies and their friends. In Newark, another guy who got involved, and this was part of the strategy, this came out of the Port Huron statement, the SDS and all that. The SDS in the 60s came into the cities, and they were doing the same basic strategy of they wanted to deal with working people, right? That was their alleged thing. We want to deal with working people. Well, I lived in a neighborhood with real working people with work, right? But they didn't want to deal with working people. They wanted to deal with
democratic society.
Yeah, right. Tom Hayden, who married, became the future bride of Jane Fonda, was in Newark for the 3 or 4 years preceding the riots. And the riots in Newark were in '67. They were the first big northeastern riots. Left about 30 people dead. But before '67 was out, Hayden had already published a book called Rebellion in Newark. So, I mean, he was writing it as they, as they went along. He was like stage directing a riot. And then, of course, he called it a rebellion. You had to dress it up because riot implies crazy people running around the street just stealing liquor, right? So, and then you begin to see the creation of this whole industry designed to foster a state of dependence among a certain large class of people. You want to train them to think of themselves as an aggregate, as a block, rather than as an individual. They do. You succeed for their votes now. You just have to ring one bell. You don't have to go door to door and ask people or explain your agenda. You just have to say, click D, and everything's fine. Everything will be cool.
Yeah. Well, now they've run through the black culture.
Right.
And they have essentially gone through that whole, it took them 40, 50 years. But now their big growth industry, of course, is illegal immigration.
Right, and that only works.
That's the new deal.
Yeah, I mean, they're open about it now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're hardly even subtle. I saw Chuck Schumer a few weeks ago saying, oh, yeah, we need, 5 million new pool boys. No, he said our people aren't reproducing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're right. Your people aren't reproducing. They're aborting their children, right? And so what they have to do then it gets really a grand strategy is because our people, are reproducing. You've got to not only bring in illegals, you got to steal our children through the educational establishment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's but Schumer admitted as much.
Yeah,
he said
did.
our people aren't reproducing. And I'm sure if you took the average two-parent Democratic household today, I imagine they don't average more than one person per two. One born human, right? Think about that.
Probably.
I mean, there's a phenomenon that I read an article about this, I don't know, not too long ago, called The Liberals Without Grandchildren. So when liberals get to grandparental age, and 30 or 40 years ago, liberals would have a couple kids, right? But their kids aren't having kids. Or if they're having kids, they're putting it off so long that by the time the grandparents are now 90 or something when kids are coming along. So what you do then is you import people to vote your way.
Yeah. Well, and present company excluded, but there have been lots of problems with, male hormones going down and other, low sperm counts and things.
Because you and I are beyond those problems.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that. But exactly, but it. The head-scratching thing of why? Why would anybody want to just blast open the border and just have millions of people rush in with no medical checks and just handing them money? And I mean, why? That's crazy.
Right.
Cloward and Piven.
There it is.
They opened the door for that.
You need that aggregate, right?
Yep.
There. What is it? As Stalin, I think, said, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic.
Yeah.
For Cloward and Piven, one voter is irrelevancy. A million voters is something worth talking about.
That's right.
And it's all in the numbers. It's all training people not to think, training people not to question. And now in retrospect, when in the early part of this century, you'd see people driving around with their question authority bumper stickers.
Oh yeah. And now I want to put one that says question false authority.
Yeah.
That's what I want the bumper sticker to say, because almost all authority out there is.
Well, and what's interesting in that regard is I remember at the outset of the whole COVID thing, I saw a guy, my office is in Westport, which is a hip, it is the Capitol Hill of Kansas City, the countercultural place where everyone is totally quiescent to authority.
I used to be the Pope of that.
Yeah, I know you were. You owned many ultimate. Yeah, I'm not even an altar boy in your league. But I see a guy standing there waiting for a bus, which is what adult stands there waiting for a bus, and his T-shirt has one word on it: obey.
Oh yeah. That was an artist named Shepard Fairey.
Yeah.
Who was big in L.A.
Yeah.
When I was there, I used to I've told you about the Starbucks where
Sure.
I talked to Jason Alexander and all
Right.
this. Well, this guy was a regular there. And yeah, that was his.
And was that meant ironically?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
Andre the Giant was, he took a highly posterized image of Andre the Giant.
Right.
It made no sense.
Right.
And underneath was the word obey.
Yeah.
And it was this street art, vandalism. It was
Right.
everywhere.
Right. Right.
And it became it came out of L.A., but it was a national phenomenon. You'd be walking down an alleyway, and there'd be the back of a tall building, and in one corner you'd see Andre the Giant looking down at you. Obey. It was everywhere.
Well, this guy, maybe I'm misreading his impulses, but the fact that he was waiting for a bus makes me think that my original reaction was confirmed. Did not look like he was in the irony of the word obey. He looked like someone who wanted to obey.
Well, it's just like you said a couple episodes ago. The book by the 1984 was not supposed to be
A training manual.
a training manual.
Right. Has become that. The other thing in regard to that is the first time I went to San Francisco, and I was driving and I rented a car. No, I was just in a cab from the airport, which is south of town. And the bumper sticker in the car in front of me just said one word on it: submit.
Oh,
Right? I said, "Well, welcome to San Francisco."
the buses in L.A., I rode the buses a lot.
Yeah.
I lived right on Wilshire Boulevard, and it was just really easy. There was a bus by every couple of minutes.
Right.
Sometimes when I didn't want to drive or I didn't want to walk, I would just jump on that bus. Well, they had this thing called the Bus Riders Union,
There you go.
and it was Marxists.
Yeah.
It took me a little while to figure it out. It's like, what the hell, Bus Riders Union?
Right.
And then they'd have all these juvenile, look like the kind of stuff you do in junior high with little the drawings and things. But what they were trying to do was just rabble rouse. They were doing the old Cloward and Piven thing. Let's all complain about mass transit not being enough, so we can demand more and more, and then we can bring it down. We can clog the system and overwhelm it.
Right. I mean, you see bicyclists doing that in cities, right?
Yeah. And so and the funny thing was they'd get on these buses.
Yeah.
And I was really in the minority on a bus in L.A.
Racially or?
Racially, age-wise.
Yeah.
I mean, middle-aged white guys, two of us on a bus.
Right. I mean, if you're a middle-aged white guy and you're taking a bus, it usually signals one of two things.
Mm-hmm. DUI.
Right. DUI is one of them. You're right. Maybe three things. Other one is like totally self-flailing liberal.
Uh-huh.
I have a neighbor who is like that, and or failure,
Yeah.
loser. DUI on what do you call it? Halfway house. From some
Right.
getting out of prison, whatever. Something went wrong in your life. If you're getting on a bus and you're a middle-aged white guy, something went wrong in your life.
And I've had many things go wrong, but I've also always ridden buses, and just because I hate driving, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was funny because they would come around with their leaflets, and they'd be handing one to everybody on the bus.
Right.
And they'd see me, and they'd just turn around because it was all, down with the man and all this stuff, and then they'd, the man.
The man, right. You're the man. Down with it. No, hey, not quite yet. No, it's
what do you got there, son? Here, let me see that, son.
yeah.
Nope.
Now the question is, in terms of the Cloward-Piven strategy, which we're talking about, the overwhelming of the system, the creating of the entitlement society where people are entitled to everything and they get it, and if they don't get it, they riot or whatever. Is there a turning point where it becomes? Is there a point where you can turn it back, or does it simply continue on, and does it overwhelm us, and are we all calling each other comrade 10 years from now?
Well, first of all, I don't think they really did this. They just articulated it.
Yeah.
to say that they started this thing gives them way too much credit, or to say that it was the Cloward-Piven strategy.
Right.
Really, what it was just it was just like Saul Alinsky or any of these other things. You're just writing down sneaky, creepy ways of destroying America and overturning the system,
Right.
and creating mayhem.
Right.
Rust never sleeps. It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
Just waiting. And so it's a cyclical thing, in my opinion. It's always going to be a cyclical thing. It's destruction. I mean, we have different cycles of destruction. There's creative destruction, which is the healthy kind,
Right.
that we hope for in a relatively free market system.
Uh-huh.
Which one of the first indications that you can see that your nation is in big trouble is when creative destruction is somehow curtailed or stopped by the visible hand.
Right.
So when the invisible hand is over here trying to do its thing and cleaning the system and keeping all the knives sharp and keeping all the sand out of the gearbox, all of a sudden, these other do-gooders they're going to fix everything. They stop the wheels of that creative destruction, and they bring in this sort of delayed corrosion
Right.
of the system, which is what they were doing. They're saying, post-World War II, we were all fat and happy. We were the king's cock of the walk, king of the world, money in our pocket, feeling a little guilty. Look at all the booming and busting up and stuff we did here. Here you go, kid. We were like Sinatra. We were duking everybody hundreds, you know?
Right.
Well, this is just a natural way of these creeps coming in and going, that ain't enough.
Well, plus what they did is, I think you're right, is they put their name on a strategy that's been in place for probably since the Russian Revolution, if not before that.
Not before, if it hasn't happened over and over again.
Yeah, right. And there have been peaks and valleys. There have been points where their momentum was stalled, certainly. And the question is, what kind of cultural force would it take to reverse their momentum? I think we saw a heartening sign just the last couple of weeks in Florida.
Florida, yeah.
Disney surrendered.
Yeah.
Disney said no mas, right? They dumped their CEO in the battle with the state of Florida, with Governor Ron DeSantis. And they're almost apologizing for it, for what they did.
I heard they're coming around again.
Yeah.
Trying to get that all reinstated.
Right. So that
I don't think they've.
Oh, no. You know that there's people in the ranks who are going to sabotage them at the first moment they get an opportunity.
But I agree with you. That was like watching Musk do his thing.
Yes.
To say, when you see all that momentum where one side's getting really cocky and they got closets full of stuff going, yeah. And it's just out of control. The cycle happens. Your original question was, what's it going to take, or are we going to have? I'd really like to know what you think. I believe that eventually it takes true destruction for something better to emerge after there's been so much hollowing out of systems and processes and cultural ideals. Ideals are so muddied, and I just think it really takes it really takes a stripping away.
You're right. I think I don't disagree with, as Pollyannish as I am, I do not disagree with you that some semi-catastrophic event may be necessary for a true and deep rethinking of where this, and we'll put Cloward-Piven as the sort of titular characters, their kind of thinking has led us. So, but comrade, I don't think we're there yet. I think that it'll take a little while to get to people like you and I. We'll be the last two guys left. We'll be out there, with our AR-15s and standing on an island someplace as they come in and surround us. And
Oh, boy, you paint a beautiful picture.
and we can walk. This is like the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Roy. So, hey, very good. And in any case, we'll be back next week, and we can pick this up some more.
I think all this stuff will be settled by next week.
By
and
now,
we
it's
can
a
move
week,
on to
right?
other
We can,
things.
we got everything will be done. What do we talk about? We'll talk about baseball next week or something. Because everything else will be solved. We'll talk about the upcoming spring training season, 3 months hence or whatever. Hey, Loy, thanks for joining us today, and
Thanks, Jack.
audience, thanks for tuning in. You are, of course, watching Upstream with Cashill and Edge.